All right, everybody, this video is going to go over the domain and range of piecewise functions. And your activity today is piecewise functions and rational functions. But all the vertical asymptote, horizontal asymptote, and holes, all those pieces of information that you need to find the domain and range of rational functions, you did the other day. So if you need to go back and watch that Edpuzzle video, you can. All right, so with piecewise functions, it can be a little bit more challenging because you obviously have different pieces of the graph. Domain is still left to right. And the main thing we want to look for are arrows to the left, arrow to the right, and if there's any gaps in between where one piece stops and the other piece picks up. So the first thing that I'm going to notice about this graph is it has an arrow to the left. So, and this will continue to the left forever and ever and ever. So I know that my domain is negative infinity to the left. And I'm just going to kind of trace it. See how this piece is going to stop when x is -1. But there's not a gap in between the pieces going to left to right. The other piece is going to start right back up again. So I don't have to worry about breaking this up. I can just continue it right along. And I do see that there is an arrow to the right, which would be positive infinity. All right, range is low to high, minimum to maximum. So I'm going to notice that I do have a piece over here that is pointing down. That piece is going into the negative y value of the graph. So I'm just going to trace it up. All right, and again, I don't have any gaps in between because even though this piece ends at 2, if I follow my graph over this way, I don't have any gaps. This one is going to take over. So this piece only goes as high as 2. But 2 is not the highest part of the whole entire graph. The whole entire graph is 4. And everything in between. So like this piece is on 2, but then like this piece would have 3, or that point would be 3, and then that point would be 4. So I'm not skipping anything. So my range is negative infinity because I have and actually I have 2 arrows pointing down. So that's even more confirmation that I don't have a minimum. My range will be negative infinity. But the maximum of this graph is 4. And that is a closed circle, so it gets a bracket. If that was an open circle, it would get a parenthesis. All right, so let's do the second one. Domain left to right. So I do have an arrow to the left. So negative infinity. And this piece ends at -2. And if you notice that there is a huge gap here. There is a gap in between these two pieces. So I'm going to have to do my domain as 2 separate answers. The first piece goes from negative infinity to -2. Closed bracket because it's a closed circle. And then this little symbol is like a U, and it basically just means we're about to join another part of the answer. So my other piece, the furthest to the left that this piece goes is 1. That's an open circle, so it gets a parenthesis. But I do have an arrow here that's going to continue to the right forever and ever and ever. So there's the domain. Range, I do have an arrow over here that's pointed down. So negative infinity. And I don't really have to worry about this piece so much because you see how it's just kind of in the middle of the graph? Up here, is where I have a maximum, and I forgot to number that. Let's pretend that's 4 as well. And even though there's no point that was actually drawn, I mean, that's the vertex. That is an actual point that's on the graph. So that would get a bracket. All right, the next one. All right, the furthest at the left that this graph goes is -2. That's a closed circle, so it gets a closed bracket. And this piece goes up until +2, but then this one, it picks up where the last piece left off. So I do not have a gap in between my pieces. And I do see that I have an arrow over here to the right, forever and ever and ever. All right, my range, I don't have any arrows pointing down. And so this point here looks like the minimum of the graph. So -1, that's an open circle, so it needs a parenthesis. And then even though like the highest that this piece goes looks like it's 2, this piece has an arrow that's going to continue up forever and ever and ever. So that would be infinity. All right, next one. I have an arrow on the left. I don't have any gaps because when this piece stops, this piece starts up again. But this piece only goes as far to the right as 2. That's a closed circle, so it gets a bracket. All right, range. I have an arrow pointing down. I don't have any arrows pointing up. This piece is kind of just in the middle. So this piece looks like it has a maximum at 4 as well. All right, I want to do one more graph because I just realized I didn't show you any examples where it has a minimum. Oh no, I did. I showed you one with a minimum, but I didn't show you any examples where the range has a gap in between the two pieces. All right, so this one, the domain, I have an arrow to the left, I have an arrow to the right, and there's no break because when the first piece stops, the second piece starts up again. My range, I do have an arrow pointing down. But if you look, the highest that this piece goes is -2. And then I have a huge gap before the other piece starts up again. So I have a break in my range for this one. So this first piece goes from -infinity to -2. Parenthesis, because that's an open circle, that little U symbol, and now the minimum of the next piece is 1. I'm sorry, that should get a bracket because there's a closed circle there. And this arrow will point up forever and ever and ever. All right, so use this video to help you with the last slide of today's assignment.